Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Human Echoes recap for Better Call Saul Season 3, Episode 1. This one's called Mabel. And we kick this episode off like we have with all the other episodes, the season premiere episodes of Better Call Saul so far. Season 1 and Season 2 established the trend, and here we are again in Omaha, Nebraska, in the Cinnabon, following Gene, Saul's alter ego, as witness protection program, present day, following Breaking Bad. He's living his life. He's safe. He's not lawyering. He's just the manager of a Cinnabon. And he's miserable. And it's interesting going back to these things over and over again, even over the course of, we've only had 3 of these glimpses into Saul's past life, right? Like they do it at the beginning of Season 1, beginning of Season 2, beginning of Season 3. We're not getting a lot of this, but even in these small little windows into what's happening with Saul in the present day, we're seeing a kind of arc. There is an overriding theme that Saul's unhappy, that he sort of misses his previous life, but we're really starting to see that bubble up out of him. You know, in the first season, we had him watching the VHS tapes, and he's doing it hiding in his home. And then he's a little bit braver, right? In Season 2, he writes, SG was here on the wall. And now, here we are in Season 3, he's sitting there eating his sandwich. We get, the montage, by the way, is really interesting here, the way the editing goes. It's more frenetic, it's more just like amped up just a little bit more, where you feel the tension in his life, the need to break out of this mundane black and white existence. And he gets the opportunity. He's up, he's gone on his lunch break. He's sitting there eating his homemade sandwich and his off-brand cola and his little sandwich baggie with the fold-over top full of Bugles, and I have been there so many times. Back when I was working at Walmart, I was like, that's just me. I've just done that so many times. It's such a normal, boring work lunch. By the way, totally just down to the off-brand soda, like that was that cheap. And he sees this guy running from mall security. Dude wearing like a really weird overcoat. I couldn't tell if he stole it or if he brought that coat into the mall with which to steal. So he would have something to hide his CDs under. But he's wearing his big coat. He stumbles in front of Saul Goodman, Jimmy McGill, Gene, whatever his name is in Omaha, drops his CDs on the floor. They go clattering around, and Jimmy gets the whole picture. He sees this guy looking around. He doesn't say anything to the kid. The kid doesn't say anything to him, but he's got this in his mind, and the kid hides in the photo booth. The cops come running up. They say, hey, did you see this guy run by? And, man, it's just, the acting in this show is incredible. It's just amazing. Okay, and you see Jimmy here, Gene, I guess we should say, like, fighting within himself, warring over, what do I say? Snitching is, like, anathema to me. That's the, like, blasphemy against my lawyer God. You just don't snitch. And yet he does. He brings himself to point the finger, and the kid, the cops find the kid in the photo booth. They're taking him away, and Jimmy snaps, and he's like, stop, get a lawyer. Don't say anything. And this is after the cops have been like, hey, thanks, good citizen. And then, they're obviously not happy about that now that he's given this guy legal advice. And I don't know where this is going exactly, but I like that it feels like at least it's going somewhere. I don't know if we're gonna, it doesn't seem like Better Call Saul is going to last more than maybe 5 seasons. That seems like a good arc for it. Breaking Bad lasted 5 seasons. I think Better Call Saul has about 5 seasons of story in it. And we're seeing, so we're going to get some more influence, more insight into what's happening with Saul in Omaha. And he goes back to the Cinnabon, right? And he passes out. It's, at this point, I think, basically impossible to know what's going on. If it's, somebody mentioned that they saw him mouth the word fugue state before he passed out, as if he was going to try to pull what Walt pulled in like season 1 or 2 of Breaking Bad, where he acted like he had lost his memory so he could do some kind of weird legal mess around thing. That's an interesting theory. It's also possible he's just under so much stress from trying to keep his real self in that he just can't. All right. And so whichever one it is both really interesting directions for this black and white segment to go. Obviously, unless they decide to go in a completely different direction this year and just have like, here's a whole show that's just Saul in present day, which I don't think we're going to get. We're going to have to wait all the way until next year to find out what happens to Gene. But this is still like, this is an incredible season opener. We then pick up with sort of the real story, the past story that we're sort of mostly following, with Saul and his brother Chuck having the same conversation that we heard him have at the end of the last season. Saul confesses. Chuck has been recording the whole thing. And much like season 2, where we see something go down and we're left with, okay, we understand how this is going to happen. And then season 2, once we pick back, at the end of season 1, we have pick up at the beginning of season 2, and we have Jimmy like doing more stuff. We see more context there around the scene that we had seen at the end of season 1. And here we have that playing out again, where at the end of season 2, it looked like, Jimmy's left. Chuck has this tape. The really obvious assumption, just having watched any amount of TV, is that Chuck's going to try to get Jimmy in court, get him disbarred from being a lawyer, something. And so you just left with this giant cliffhanger. And here we come back from season 3, and it's not completely different from what we thought it was, but we get more information. We see that, Saul hasn't just left. He's just gone outside to call, Hamlin about what's happening to Hamlin number 1. By the way, just point out, there's 2 Hamlins in the name, Hamlin, and McGill. They're still keeping that second Hamlin in their back pocket. I assume there's a father figure. I assume they have something that they want to do with them eventually, that they didn't just accidentally put 2 H's in HHM. I have no idea if it'll be this season or ever. Maybe they just don't ever address that. But if the second Hamlin shows up, I think that's going to be cool. But he goes out and calls, Hamlin and says, "Hey, listen, got him back. No, I'm not going to tell you what I said to him. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Everything's cool." And he goes back and he talks to Chuck. It's not like the idea that conversation wasn't over there is a really interesting take on that. And the fact that he goes back and he has this sort of, hey, remember when we were kids, we read this book, Chuck talks about the lamp that he had. And it's important to do that. I know there are some viewers of this show that just hate Chuck, and they think of him as evil and, he's Darth Vader for our times or whatever. But these 2 guys are brothers. They're human people brothers who are not evil or inherently bad people in any particular way. They both look at themselves and see themselves as justified in these actions. And to pull back from Chuck having the, bring the sledgehammer back down, gotcha tape thing with this simple human conversation about childhood, because these guys grew up together. Like, we see them now as, as adults, and they've have all this baggage, but part of that baggage is they just lived their lives together for a long time. And there's so much that goes along with that. It was really powerful to put that context in and show that Chuck had some kind of humanity in him, if that makes sense. But then, even then, so you get the sense, okay, maybe Chuck's going to pull back. Maybe he's willing to forgive Jimmy, or, maybe not use the tape. And then Chuck says, but, don't take the fact that we're talking about the old times and, the good times and me reading you a book. Don't take that as I'm going to go soft on you and I'm going to forget what happened here. And he says, you will pay. And we pull back again into, now Chuck has more he's not scary exactly, but we show both sides there. We see the human side, but we also see the side that's really going to be Jimmy's main nemesis throughout this season. In the meantime, Mike is going crazy trying to figure out how the end of the previous season happened. We did another flashback where we see the don't note and we see the stick on the steering wheel and all that stuff, and cut to Mike driving away in a panic, looking around him, stops and sort of does a cursory check of the car. Beautiful cinematography here, by the way. Storm in the background. Just like, I assume that was just, hey, it happened to be a storm in the background and it looks awesome, so let's shoot it. But just amazing looking. Everything in the show is amazing looking. And he doesn't find anything right away. He takes it to a junkyard, tears the whole car apart. Like a beautiful montage, just really well edited, acted by Mike Ehrmantraut, who just does a great job of embodying Mike. Acted by Jonathan Banks. You know what I mean. Jonathan Banks just brings his whole persona to Mike, where, there's almost, I don't say no dialogue. Mike talks to some people a little bit, but very little Mike dialogue in this episode, and yet Mike is the strongest character in here. And part of it's the writing, obviously. Part of it's them writing him as a smart, competent character. But also, Jonathan Banks just, like, bringing that sharpness to life in a way that is very believable. Doesn't find the tracker, though, right away. And until we get one of these revelatory moments where he's sitting in the office of the junkyard. They've said, listen, you can't keep tearing your car apart. It's time for us to go home. 15 minutes. We'll call you a cab. He's sitting there waiting for a cab. And as he's waiting, he looks at the gas caps and he thinks, light bulb. Do you guys have any gas caps? And that sets up this whole beautiful gas cap arc in this episode. The musical gas caps is what I have it called in my notes. That Mike will be doing throughout the episode. There's also the fact that Chuck shows Hamlin the tape. He plays it for him, and I don't know why. I understand from a storytelling perspective that we need Hamlin to explain to us as the audience, okay, legally, Chuck can't do anything with this tape. Okay, this is not like pulp mystery solving theater drama television like we're used to, where just having that confession is just a slam dunk instantly, you're going to be okay. A, Jimmy's a lawyer. B, Jimmy's a really good lawyer. And C, chain of evidence is a thing that exists in real life. So the tape is not legally helpful to Chuck. He's not going to get him disbarred. He's not going to take him to court directly. And Hamlin's purpose in this scene is obvious to that, because we need someone to tell the audience, right? Like, that's the point. But I don't know from a story perspective why Chuck is showing Hamlin the tape, because Chuck knows this already. He doesn't need Hamlin to tell him this information. He doesn't need a "as you know, Bob" scene for him to get that there's something wrong. So Hamlin must be in on the whatever Chuck is doing. Like, Chuck must need him for his plan. We don't see that. We don't get enough of what Chuck's plan is. I'll go into that a little bit more detail, but I just thought that was interesting. There's a lot of stuff about Chuck's plan we don't know, but I'm going to assume for now, because Hamlin's here and the fact that Chuck showed him the tape, he wouldn't just do it for no reason, that Hamlin is going to be involved in that scheme. We cut also to Jimmy coming back to his law offices and Kim finishing up with the rather insistent old lady who's very super detail oriented about her garden being included and the pond in the garden being included in the will, despite the fact that just all those little moments of humor at the expense of the elderly that we're going to get some of in these episodes as Jimmy's practicing elder law. But the big purpose of this, I think, twofold. A, Jimmy, in my mind, is taking Kim, maybe not for granted. Yeah, for granted. He just stormed out. He's like, I've got clients here, but hey, you take care of them. It'll be good. I've got to go take care of Chuck. And Kim was just left with all of these people in her lap. It's not her fault Jimmy's a screw up. It's not her fault that Chuck decided to go off the deep end. And here she is dealing with Jimmy's clients, and she doesn't have time for this. On top of that, so we have her like conflict with Jimmy where she's having to pick up his pieces. The other half of this scene, the other really important storytelling thing that happens here is that Jimmy's like, hey, all right, I'll take care of it. I'll take them off your hands. Like the wills, I'll finish that up. And she says, no, we're not doing that. We're not partners here. We decided that we were separate law offices under the same roof. So I'm going to take care of my clients because that's the only way that I can't see people for you. I'm my own lawyer. These people agreed to take me on as their lawyer, so I'm going to do it. And Jimmy says, well, listen, why be a stickler for the law? But we're reestablishing here for this season the fact that Kim really believes in the law and believes in doing the right thing. And while we have seen her be willing to fudge things a little bit sometimes for Jimmy, that's not in her nature, and she's not ever willing to go as far as he's willing to go. And that's the conflict that I think, I mean, we know they don't end up together, assuming she doesn't get killed, and that's possible she does, but assuming that they end their relationship, how did that word come out? I'm going to talk like in a Southern accent now, you guys. Assuming that they're going to end their relationship in a normal human, we can't be together anymore type of breakup, this is going to be the cause of it. It has to be. That she's not going to be able to continue down this road with Slippin' Jimmy as her sidekick. She's gonna break. And she also mentions that Jimmy says, listen, she asks him what they talked about. And he says, well, it was that thing that you said you didn't want to ever talk about because it's unethical and you're keeping a secret for me. And that really rankles your law abiding citizen needs. So I'm not going to tell you. And it's just all of this building up. Kim takes her stuff to Mesa Verde. We see her, doing her lawyer job, and Mesa Verde's happy with her. They say, hey man, you got the retrial moved up 3 weeks. That's amazing. We love the work that you've done. But the way they talk about the mistake that Chuck made and her knowing that it wasn't a mistake, I think all of this stuff is really starting to weigh on her heavily, because she says, let me take this back and make sure that everything's right. And the scene where she's sitting there deleting the period, putting in a semicolon, deleting the semicolon, putting in dashes, putting back a semicolon that was there the first time, it's, I think, really indicative of the stress that she's under, because from everything, right? She's keeping all these secrets for Jimmy. She's trying to be this lawyer on her own that Hamlin and McGill could not be all together. Obviously, Jimmy screwed that up for them. It's Chuck's, it seemed like Chuck's screw up, but she's got all of this weight on her shoulders and she's trying to bear it alone. And it's going to be too much for her, possibly. I'm not saying she won't be able to do this lawyering job, but you can tell that it's really weighing heavy on her. What if she fails? What if she does something wrong? What if she fails to dot one little I across one little T? She's finished, and it's killing her, for lack of a better term. I mean, I'm not saying literally causing her to die, but it can't be good for your health to be that stressed out. Then we get a scene that I thought, I didn't think I was going to see this. I was very surprised that we got this interaction, and we see Jimmy, he's doing his elder law stuff. He's seeing clients. Everything's going good. Lady's showing him all the pictures of her grandkids, and he has to, deal with the fact that he's talking and talking and talking. Gets to the end of that, and his next client is the Air Force colonel or captain, I think it's the Air Force, from the base where he had filmed his commercial illegally. And not illegally, but he lied his way onto the base. And this guy is ticked off. He's not okay with Jimmy lying to him to get on his base. And there's several layers to this scene that are really brilliant. The acting here is just incredible, from the guy himself. Like this guy just nails it, knocks it out of the park. And he does such a great job. But there's the other layer as well of especially, and I watched this episode twice. Going back and watching the dialogue and the way he's talking to Jimmy, and like, you should be ashamed of yourself. All you guys are alike. You're, sinking to the lowest common denominator. You really feel like this is dialogue that could be coming out of Chuck's mouth. And Jimmy responds to this dialogue as if it's coming out of Chuck's mouth, where he says, it's always the same with you. This guy, he's met before, but like, clearly he's talking to Chuck. And I love that dichotomy, that you have these two guys in this room together seeing completely different things. Jimmy still talking to somebody else, and this guy trying to get the right thing done. Speaking of which, it's yet another brilliant moment where there's the question of morality keeps coming up, of where's your line? How much are you willing to give up to do the right thing? Jimmy has gone through being beaten down after trying to do the right thing over and over in seasons 1 and 2. And now he's kind of given into the Slippin' Jimmy persona. He's totally cool with that guy. But here he meets somebody who has not given up his standards yet, but he puts the Slippin' Jimmy, sort of headlock on him and says, look, I can make this look bad for you. I could put your job in jeopardy. Are you sure you want to stand up for your principles and do this thing that you're threatening to do? And on the one hand, there's the fact that the guy backs down, which, Jimmy drawing everybody around him into his gravitational pull of gray morality, but also the fact that the guy says to him, listen, the wheel's going to turn. It's going to be you again. And having all the more effective because we've seen in this episode that, Saul Goodman didn't make it. Slippin' Jimmy didn't make it. Gene is not making it. Like, all of these decisions are going to come back to haunt him. And it's, it's really, really poignant to see both of these people sort of at this point, especially knowing where they're going to end up. To get back to the Mike subplot, he does as I mentioned, the musical hubcaps thing, gets back with the vet from, I think, season 1 that he met the vet, or sort of got into the underworld and, got some contacts with people, got into being Mike Ehrmantraut, essentially. And good scene, really beautifully shot. Ultimate, you don't even have to have this scene. If you just cut this scene, it wouldn't have been the end of the world. You could have seen him with the tracker, assume that he bought it. I think maybe eBay was around at this point. He could have gone to the library and bought it on eBay. But seeing this guy, first of all, again, beautifully shot, this train yard, it's lit gorgeously. Seeing this guy show up, seeing Mike's contacts, and not only that, but the human moment that he has where the vet asks about the dog. Because it's so easy to think of these people, in Mike's world especially, as all hardened criminals, all, just doing the job of being criminals and no human side. But Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul were always about showing all the sides of these people. And this guy, despite the fact that he's willing to work with Mike, that he knows what Mike's doing, that he's in some shady business, also is legitimately concerned about animals. And he says to Mike, hey, listen, you're not leaving that dog alone, by himself, are you? He needs company and stuff, and really shows genuine interest. So we see that at the end of last season as well with the gun guy, where he's not, he's professional and he's a good guy, but you also have those connections where he's a human dude who cares about things and, wants to see Mike not get caught for his own sake, but, he was in the war and all this stuff. And Vince Gilligan and his writing crew really just do an amazing job of bringing out the human side. And, the episode sort of closes out with Mike doing his thing. He swaps out the trackers. He gets the, gets the fake one out. It's all a bunch of really smart Mike stuff. I don't want to go into the details of it's, the battery runs. He sees what happens when you take the battery out, when you run the battery down. Okay, he needs to run it down so that they'll come and change the battery. He fakes out needing to change the battery, gives them the new tracker that he has and tracks them down instead. It's all, the details of it aren't important, but the storytelling, the way that they show all this without Mike hardly ever saying a word, is just brilliant. And I'm saving this bit for last because despite the fact that the Mike running off against the tracker is sort of the big action beat, I think the hugest moment of this episode is Chuck playing the tape for Ernesto accidentally. Ernesto comes, he brings batteries, Chuck says, can you put these in for me? It just so happens that the tape is right there at the point where Jimmy is confessing his indiscretions, and Ernesto hears it. And Chuck yells at him, says, hey, listen, don't tell anybody. You can't tell anybody. We've got client confidentiality. I don't know what his angle is here. I think if I was a lawyer, I might could figure it out, but I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know what he's trying to pull. But it's what I do know is that he is now again being pulled into Jimmy's orbit, right? I talked earlier about the gravitational pull of Jimmy's gray morality. Chuck has always been about the law. He's always been about doing things the right way. And Slippin' Jimmy's always been the one who is willing to manipulate and to cajole and to do things underhanded and to, go around behind the law's back. Here Chuck is. He does not have a legal leg to stand on, but he's sure going to pull a con. He's he's becoming his brother. And that's what I love about this moment, that you see, this is the kind of thing that Jimmy would do. And now Chuck is finally sinking down to his level. Season 1, Jimmy says to him, come on down in the dirt with me, roll around here. Chuck, get dirty with me. Chuck resisted. He said, I'm going to do the right thing. Finally, here at the beginning of season 3, we have Chuck rolling around in the dirt with Jimmy doing the wrong thing. And I'm totally psyched to see where this goes because, Chuck's trying to con a con man. Jimmy's good at this. Chuck is not. I'm not saying Chuck will be bad. I think that it will be a problem for Jimmy, but I really potentially see this backfiring on Chuck because Jimmy, if you're going to roll around on the dirt, he's already super dirty. He's gotten accustomed to it. He likes it down there in the dirt. Chuck is going to have to adapt really quickly. And I know that he's super smart, but I don't know. I don't know how that's going to play out. I don't know exactly what his plan is. I would love to hear what you guys think. I'd love to hear what you guys think about this whole episode. If you liked it or if you didn't like it or whatever, if you have theories about what's going on, leave them in the comments. I love to read those. I try to respond to every one of them. And yeah, I'm pumped. We got another good one, guys. Vince Gilligan still doing it. Better Call Saul still going super strong. Can't wait for next week. But until then, I'll see you guys in a little bit with another episode of the Human Echoes Recap. Take care.